Everybody, wait a minute. I mix what I like, what I like. I mix what I like is exactly where you want and need to be. I mix what I like, organic, vegan, soul food from your immediate diet. Live healthy. Live healthy. I mix what I like, what I like.
We're here on I Mix What I Like. You may check us out on imixwhatilike.org, where you can see all these other shows and what my daddy liked. And
Hey, what's up, world? Welcome to I Mix What I Like right here at I Mix What I Like. Again, I'm Jared Ball, happy to be your host. Greetings, everybody. Please do like, share, subscribe on your way in. And find any way that you like or can to support the platform. And hope you're all having as good a Tuesday as is possible. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So in any minute, I expect Barrett Brown to join us for a discussion of starting with, where did it go? Where did it go? Anyway, starting with a discussion of here we go. I'll just re-find it. Of these two films that came out over the last couple of years, and I don't know what the issue is here. It couldn't connect to upload the photo. All right. I'll try that again from, I don't, that was very odd. Don't know what the issue is. But what I will show is just this here. So these two films came out recently about the reality winner case. And I don't know if anybody had the experience I did, but yes, Reality Winner is her real name. And both films, the one more so, one of them more than the other. had went into her backstory and her bio and how the name got there and what her family was like and whatnot. And I thought, when I saw them, I thought this was as good a reason as to reach back out to Barrett Brown for a conversation of the issues related to her story, which we'll get into in a minute. He is just now getting here, so I'll halt there for a moment, and we'll come back and lay all that out in a minute. So anyway, I look forward to a very good discussion again with Barrett Brown about this and related issues. So, uh, but again, please do like, share, subscribe, put this in your socials, and I will introduce our next guest, who, among many other things, is an award-winning journalist who has written for Vanity Fair, The Daily Beast, The Guardian, Vice, The Intercept, Skeptic, Al Jazeera, The Huffington Post, and other outlets. In 2016, he won the National Magazine Award in the category of columns and commentary. He was released from federal prison in November 2016 after serving 4 years. He applied for political asylum in 2021 in the United Kingdom, where his case is currently pending, and I think has since been resolved. But we'll check in on that. And he lives in London, and of course, I'm talking about Barrett Brown, who I will now welcome back to the platform. Good to see you again, Barrett. Hope all is at least relatively well.
How you doing?
As good as could be expected. Thanks again for making the time and joining us here.
Sorry I'm
And
late. I got the time zones mixed up. Apparently, daylight savings time changes the whole
yeah, no,
London
it's all
to
good.
East Coast ratio. So
Yeah. No, it's all good. It's all good. Um, as I was saying, listen, unfortunately, my time got a little bit cut short. One of my daughter's schedules was changed midday, and of course, being her driver, I'm last to know. So we'll have to start to wrap up in about an hour, unfortunately. But so forgive me if I'm a little bit rushed, because there's a lot really that I would want to get to that relates and extends from this set of films. Which, when I watched them, I thought, again, this is as good a reason to have as an excuse to reach back out to you and set up another time for us to talk. So just again talking about these two films here. I was trying to adjust our size, but anyway, but based on the life and times of Reality Winner, who I know uh, whose story you're very familiar with. You're very familiar with, and comes up a little bit about in your book, which I should have mentioned, is of course My Glorious Defeats: Hacktivist, Narcissist, Anonymous, a memoir, which I would want to come back to as well. One of the films is more biographical than the other. The other film I thought was interesting because the script was literally all of the recordings, audio recordings from her arrest and detention by the FBI, which was in itself interesting. But so one, I wanted to first, if you would remind us the story and why you think it's important, and then we can maybe go from there and get your thoughts about the films themselves, but then maybe go from there to the more important issues that were not discussed or how they were discussed in the films.
sure. So saw Reality about a week ago. The one with Sydney Sweeney, the one that you mentioned, is based. First of all, it's a odd, but I think great decision that they made to have the movie be that afternoon when the FBI came to replace, based entirely on the audio transcript, because it, among other things, it really displays the two different positions that are kind of that are at conflict here. One is Reality Winner, who's, as you can see from this transcript, is a person of great productivity, of, someone who viewed her position within the intelligence community as an opportunity to do what she believed to be the right thing. And someone who bucked the system as a result sent some internal documents out to TheIntercept regarding Trump and Russia and some of the before we go any further, just it's always, I think, customary for me at least to point out that the 2016 election had there's a lot going on there in the background. There were several different parties at odds, similarly corrupt parties working in the background to push that election one way or the other, using some means that are familiar, some means that the U.S. has used before against other countries, some means that are a little bit more novel. Obviously, some of that methodology got more press than others, depending on who you're talking to. I mean, Congress was very much into discussing the role of online bots in that election. Online bots, whether by Russia or anyone else. Now, of course, the use of online bots to persuade, to create a fake scenario of consensus, to create confusion, that's something that goes back, unfortunately, at least 6 years before 2016, starting in Latin American elections, something that was documented by a couple of researchers, including Aaron Gallagher, someone I used to work with quite a bit. And it was something that came out that was discussed in the emails that I went to prison over in 2011, discussing the emails between the FBI, DOJ, intelligence contractors, Palantir, so forth, Peter Thiel's people. They were at that time expanding the capabilities of online personas, as they called them. They were expanding the ability for these fake online people, to infiltrate, to create, again, false senses of reality. Just using AI, using early versions of AI and so forth. And anyway, but of course, when 2016 comes around, of course, the U.S. doesn't want to talk much about its own role in this practice. It wants to talk about Russia doing, and Russia did do that to some extent. But anyway, so I just want to say that early on, because I know that the whole 2016 Russia, Trump, FBI thing, a lot of people, people sort of didn't have a certain side, and they sometimes will discount the actions of one side. And I'm just, based on what I've seen, it was a mix of polities, a mix of intelligence organizations doing different things and blaming different things on each other, and we'll never know the totality of it. That's really the nature of these things, is that there is no. Oh, and someone just pointed out in the comments, the CIA used bots in the Philippines to be anti-vax, and that's. I'm glad he brought that up, because it was the CIA. It was specifically in tandem with the firm Wikistrat, which is an Israeli intelligence firm. Now, you may not realize it, but you actually have you've been on the radar of Wikistrat before. It was a former Wikistrat contractor and U.S. Army counterintelligence officer who currently goes by a false name that had those people write to Morgan State University to try to get you fired a couple of years ago when I came on here to discuss what they were doing. And they're very close to The-Intercept, these same people. So Wikistrat, if you go look on Wikipedia, that's one of the things they're known for. They were caught up in this thing where they were using these online bots. There's no agreed term for them, unfortunately, to dissuade Filipinos from using a certain vaccine produced by the Chinese, falsely claiming it contained pork products and was thus haram, whatever. And that's one of the things Wikistrat did, and that's the kind of thing we're up against when we start even investigating, looking into, asking questions about these companies and the intelligence community, much less going up against them. You become subject to this extraordinarily, this just increasingly vast mechanism by which any truth can be watered down. The zone is flooded, that kind of thing. And that's what Rowdy Winter was, perhaps without not realizing it, was going up against when she decided to send those documents about those internal documents about Trump and Russia to The-Intercept for them to be published. So Rowdy Winter thought this was something the public needed to know. And she probably rightfully grasped that there were elements in the FBI, just as there increasingly are today, that are very much on Trump's side or on the side of fascism. I mean, one of her complaints, it's pointed out in the movie, it was Fox News always being on in the room she worked in when she was working at that site, doing translations and so forth. She understood, so to some extent, she understood that.
Can
None
I
of us
just?
goes into
I'm
this
I'm
knowing.
very sorry to cut you off, but I just for sake of clarity that she's in military intelligence because she was apparently very intelligent herself, capable of learning languages very quickly. She learned several languages that were seen as of importance to military intelligence. She's hired and put into service, into being in surveillance. She's depicted as always wanting to be doing more, but she's kind of stuck in some relatively boring job. And and then after Ed Snowden's leaks and reveals became known, it's depicted as that's kind of what inspired her. Then she's watching all this discussion about who's influencing the elections, and she sees what she sees and decides to send something to The Intercept, which she at the time thought was the place to send it. And
Yep.
then we go from there. So I just wanted to yes, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just wanted, just so folks were clear where we were, what we're talking about, if they weren't already. Yeah.
Just from her portion of the transcript in the movie, just from her, just from that alone, you can get a sense that this is someone who was essentially a true believer in the U.S. cause, who believed that it was, and this is the case for several of our more prominent whistleblowers, John Kiriakou originally, Snowden, Chelsea Manning, so forth. These are people who at the time that they conducted their leaks, they did so with the understanding that this was a part of the American process, that leaking, that this was necessary, that it has sort of a background in civil disobedience, and or Watergate and Vietnam, the Pentagon Papers in the 60s and so forth. These are people who, again, they're not necessarily trying to challenge the system itself. They're trying to challenge what they see as just a cancer in the system. And I think some of those whistleblowers have since then revised their views on the U.S. in general and come to see it in a more, I think, realistic and hostile light. And at any rate, I don't know what Reality Winner's current thinking is on that, but it's. I point that out because it makes it all the more, I suppose, probably disappointing to them, and I think informative for us, the way in which they are then treated. They get to learn firsthand the real nature of the system in a way that may not be as easy when it's being done to other people. And so the great thing about this film, from my standpoint, is that it shows, as I said earlier, these two positions. This is a person, Reality Winner, a person who loves life, has animals, she's got her things shit together. I mean, she's, very capable participant in the intelligence community. And she explains, when the FBI gets her to admit that she did send these documents to The Intercept, I mean, she explains her thinking, and has done so since then quite a bit, obviously. She explains, this is her motives. Meanwhile, the FBI agents who were there, and you really don't get to see, the public doesn't really get to see the FBI in action in the way this movie shows it. You get to see the emptiness of their conversational gambits. I mean, some of this has to do with, this is how they talk to a suspect and all that. Their interrogators do the same thing. They want to get them at ease. They want to set up a baseline of their tone of voice, their speaking habits, when they delay, when they don't, so that when they get to the real stuff, then they're able to see what the departure is, to see how different it is, figure out what they're lying about, so forth. But a lot of it's also that these FBI agents don't really have, could not really claim to have the same, I would think, comprehensive worldview. Now, I would disagree with the comprehensive worldview as put forth by Snowden and Reality Winner and Chelsea Manning, both then and especially with Snowden now. But at least they had one that they could articulate and were willing to take risks for. These FBI agents aren't taking risks. They're showing up in mass, at the house of a young woman who's suspected at most of sending documents to a media organization. they're not in a position. They're not in the same moral position. And the movie does put that across very well. And I hope it's one of those things that the centrists and so forth, the center left, I hope they'll keep in mind, since they so often don't, that's what the FBI really is. It's not the savior of democracy that it's inexplicably been denoted as by both mainstream and sort of layman centrists in the last 10 years. I don't have to tell you this or your viewers, but it's just one of those things that we'll get to that later, I guess. But I just wanted to just sum up by saying that there is a disconnect, obviously, in how the FBI is viewed by the centrists, and it seems to me that they keep putting their faith in the FBI, and the hope that the FBI will deliver what they want, whether it be Trump's head on a platter or whatever, and they keep not getting it, and they don't seem to learn from that, and we just go back to square one, and the FBI just regains its halo among people who should know better. And that brings us where we are today, where the FBI is now, with these latest purges, which I would like to enjoy it more than I am. I wish I could have more fun with it, but you kind of know what FBI agents, what kind of agents are being purged, what kind of operations are being revisited, and which ones are ongoing. And they've already basically made it clear that their new emphasis is the old emphasis: Black Lives Matters. That's basically
going back to like you said, it's back to the basics, and when so for sure, and I agree that on the one hand, it's exciting to see the idea of the FBI as an institution being attacked is by a political administration and targeted for investigation and oversight and even reduction, but in this context, obviously this is a mess. It's gonna make nothing better, at least not immediately. Things are definitely gonna have to get worse, unfortunately, in the interim. But all right, so but not to go, we should double back to that. But so the first, well, at least one part of what's interesting about this story you've laid out a little bit already, or one thing that's interesting is this: you get a little bit in one of the films of a look at the real life behavior of FBI agents and all of that, and you get and so far in the story, you and I have gotten to where Reality Winner has submitted these documents to TheIntercept, which again at the time is in its heyday. It's in a level. It's gotten the Snowden reveal, and Glenn and Laura are everything is 250 million, I think, was the seed funding. All of that is everything
from
is
Pierre Omidyar.
For exactly,
and associate of Peter Thiel and Elon Musk going way back.
So please,
this was public information back then that a few people pointed to and were like, what's up with that? I wish I had been outside of prison at the time and in a better position to follow that thread, because I had no idea where Pierre Omidyar was. I knew Peter Thiel, obviously. I was in prison because of Peter Thiel. Musk, I still had no idea about. But if that should have been, in a more ideal society, that would have been more of a issue. And in an ideal society, that would be more of an issue now. And we wouldn't have, this is something else I wanted to talk about regarding this film, because one nice thing about it is it does throw the ball into the Intercept's court a bit. They don't explain what happened over there, but they do, and the film does, to someone who's coming to that, a virgin to these things. It would make you go online afterwards and be like, what happened with the Intercept and Reality Winner documents? And here's the answer to it. And this is an answer that's been available to know and explained over and over again by people like myself, a number of other former Intercept contributors, Ken Silverstein, Tim Sharrock, a number of people, which is that the Intercept, again, aside from having gotten its seed money from Pierre Omidyar, a guy whose ties to the intelligence community are extensive. Not only had Pierre Omidyar himself, before starting The Intercept, called whistleblowers traitors and expressed his intent they'd be imprisoned. Those are the things that, again, the fact that those weren't picked up on, and then that everyone just went along with this Intercept being a really independent thing that you should definitely send leaked information to. That's an unfortunate. There's a lot to be answered for in terms of people, including Snowden, who, at the very least, that should have become clear to Snowden at some point around 2017, 2018, at the very latest, when it became clear to the rest of us. And it should have been something he was willing to point out himself, but he's been mum about it. And that's obviously, from my standpoint, very suspicious. I was just learning about I was just getting a sense of how many connections the Intercept had to the FBI, to the NYPD, to the intelligence community, to private contractors. About mid-2017, I got out of prison late 2016, and I realized that Sam Biddle was writing there. Sam Biddle is a guy who used to, anyway. This is just a great indictment of everything, that the Intercept went on for that long, that so many people have written for the Intercept, have worked there, and kept their mouths shut, even when this stuff started coming out, even when, as it happened with the Reality Winner documents. Let me start over. The Reality Winner documents was just one of several instances where the Intercept was caught doing something that is inexplicable outside the context of a intelligence agency creation. There were several bylines on the original article that came out of the Reality Winner documents.
And again, I'm sorry. Sorry for the interrupt. I just want to be clear. Reality Winner, while working in military intelligence, sees some information about the influence of elections, et cetera, and so forth, wants to play, in her mind, a positive role, prints out some documents, and then, as it becomes important, folds them, puts them in an envelope, and sends them to the Intercept.
Yeah. And
so I just want to be clear about that part. So
absolutely. Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry,
please go ahead. Yeah.
And the printers they use, and this came up in the aftermath, they are, I don't want to, my memory is a little hazy, so I'll just say it very vaguely. There's methods by which one can determine where a particular document was printed out at within the NSA contractor offices and so forth. So as soon as the Intercept, several of their editors send a copy to the NSA to verify its legitimacy. This is something that could be done in a number of ways, but it wasn't. At any rate, so that is. We don't know if that's entirely how the FBI identified her, but it definitely played a contributing factor. And even regardless if there were other clues there was no articulable explanation for the Intercept doing that. And it gets worse when you look at who did it and who was assigned that story. One of the people who has their byline on that article that came out of the documents before Reality Winner was arrested, Esposito, a national security journalist, as he called himself, longtime ties to the intelligence community, as a lot of national security journalists have. And back in 2020, when the Black Lives Matter protests were going hard in New York City, and the NYPD was driving their cruisers through crowds and shooting journalists with rubber bullets, he took a job as the spokesperson for the NYPD. Now, I just want to repeat that. One of the guys the Intercept gave these whistleblower documents to that could get someone in prison was a guy who already had a track record and who ended up becoming the spokesperson for the NYPD. Not NYPD in some better period of time when the NYPD at the very height of its exhibited fascism, when they're driving cars through crowds of people protesting the NYPD's treatments of Black people. I mean, that's one. Now, if that was the only thing, if that was the only issue, that would be in any grown-up society where we really look at things and where there's accountability within the press, which is the opposite of ours, that would be enough right there. Another of the individuals whose byline is on that article, a Reality Winner, had already gotten John Kiriakou, the CIA whistleblower, caught, according to John Kiriakou. something John Kerry had been complaining about. He had screwed up some. I can't remember the specifics of it. It's been a long time since I pursued this, but I'm forgetting what his name was. And then who was it? Anyway, there's two more guys. I can't even remember all of the bizarre, the extents of the other issues, but they were similar to the Joe Esposito thing. They were up again. There was a. It was not a group that you would give whistleblower documents to if you didn't want the whistleblower to be caught. And then you look at the Intercept as a whole. We've already seen, who it was funded by. That should have been, that should have been enough right there. You see, they've hired on John Cook, who was the editor of Gawker back in the day. John Cook collaborated heavily with known FBI assets in writing stories about us, about when we were challenging the security state. Including falsehoods. He didn't just collaborate with them on real stuff. He collaborated with them in laundering things that were demonstrably false and were not reported elsewhere, and have since been things that have no credibility. That's what he was known for, attacking activists. They also brought on Sam Biddle, a guy who worked with John Cook on these same things, also collaborated with several known FBI assets, including Neil Rauhauser, Jennifer Emick, another one whose name I can't remember. And there's emails to this effect. I mean, we see him collaborating on them to write this story attacking anonymous activists right when a lot of us are being arrested and prosecuted, claiming that we did things that were actually done by these FBI assets. Just bizarre. Anyway, so that's, again, those are increasingly suspicious elements of The Intercept. Ken Silverstein, another one, worked for The Intercept briefly, came out, said there's something very wrong here. A good friend of mine, used to write for The Atlantic, Harper's. The preponderance. Oh, wait, sorry. The Intercept's own legal internal review over the Reality Winner documents. There was two of them. There was one that they did that even Greenwald himself said in private was a whitewash. Then there was a second one that showed, they had mishandled the documents. At no point is anyone over there taking accountability for any of it. And worse, more disturbingly, there's been so many people who have come into the space of independent journalists who have written for The Intercept and made a lot of money doing so, like Ken Silverstein. I'm sorry, not Ken Silverstein. Ken Klippenstein, who's being paid $200,000 a year by The Intercept towards the end there before he resigned over some non-issues. These people have, and they've shown themselves to have ties to the intelligence community. It's several other instances involving whistleblowers. Ken Klippenstein wrote an article about David Grush that was just bizarre, claiming David Grush was a whistleblower regarding the UAP issue, which is a whole other weird ballgame where I think everyone's kind of a suspect, but that's another issue. But he wrote a story about him using documents he'd been provided by the police and government, saying he had PTSD and what used to be an alcoholic, to discredit him while he was testifying before Congress. And his dad is in the Department of Energy, Ken Klippenstein. And so there's just so many examples. And the fact of the matter is that even with these documents, even with the movie with Sydney Sweeney coming out, and Sydney Sweeney is, a big star now, even with these revisitations of the whole issue, even with my book coming out where I go into some of this stuff and all the talks I've given, and this being a known thing among journalists, we've never gotten to a point where there's like a single article, in a major outlet saying, hey, what's up with The Intercept? And it's all its weird connections to the exact agencies that it claims to be going after. It just hasn't happened. And so one of the things that I've been kind of despondent about is seeing that, just seeing that people who have perhaps needed a job, needed to make some money, wanted to be a freelance writer, wrote The Intercept, have been not just been quiet about these things, but have continued to, in some cases, Brianna Joy Gray was one in your chat just mentioned. Brianna Joy Gray worked The Intercept. That's another bad actor who has been working with DavidSacks and so forth. Which brings me to, I'll stop talking for a second so I can figure out what I'm going to say before I say it. But
I don't mind. But I am interested in what you mean by Brianna Joy Gray being a bad actor. Because from what little I understand of her, I wouldn't put her in that category. So I'm curious as to, but yeah. So that would
So
be one thing I'd be
there's
interested.
a sure. There's a couple of little independent media outfits that are out there that have come to prominence the last couple of years, involving Matt Taibbi, DavidSacks, who is Peter Thiel's money man, and various supposedly left-wing independent participants, and sorry, independent commentators and so forth that all work together. To do justice to the situation and make sure and provide all the resident facts, I would have to get back to you with more specifics than that. But that's the gist of it. They're working with DavidSacks, so it depends on if you're, from your standpoint. If working with DavidSacks
Yeah.
is not suspicious, then I guess she's not a bad actor. If it is, if working with DavidSacks is suspicious, then I find it suspicious, and that's based on some of the things that are now. Yeah, so someone points out Matt Taibbi. So Matt Taibbi was heavily involved with Elon Musk in this whole Twitter files thing, which did yield some things, but was largely a way to launder what Elon Musk was about to do with Twitter by portraying Twitter as, which it was partly, something that was run in part by intelligence operations, but Saudi Arabia as well. This is part of Elon Musk's whole thing, and Peter Thiel's and so forth, and Trump's has been to sort of co-opt existing legitimate grievances against the establishment, against the media, and pretend that they're not involved in it. So Peter Thiel, Peter Thiel goes back 2002, getting money from the CIA, is now presenting himself, as going after the deep state. This is a guy who was put on the board of Facebook. Palantir was giving money by NQTel, the CIA's investment arm. DavidSacks is one of his chief lieutenants. So I guess it comes down to, does Gray know this? Does she know who DavidSacks is at all? Has anyone bothered to tell her? Or does she not know it? And that's something I would love to hear her explain. But DavidSacks is very much in the business of co-opting seemingly independent voices. I've seen it. It happens to. We've seen it happen a lot in the background. It's also in the foreground. There's instances that we can go into if you want to, of DavidSacks poaching people from Black organizations as well. I can't name which one here of the last few years, and then repurposing them for the purpose of not just going after the Democrats, but going after the Democrats in favor of Trump. So again, it just comes down to, what do you think of DavidSacks? Is DavidSacks the kind of guy who would legitimately fund a left-wing, independent media thing, or is he not? And the answer is he's not. And yeah, and that's something that any person, even basic civilians on Twitter, know this about him. It is impossible. I think it's impossible that Joy Breonna Gray has not done the same thing that a lot of other people have done in this sphere, which is to shut their ears and eyes to who they're involved with and what it's leading to. And unfortunately, that's been a winning strategy for Thiel since the very beginning. It's why a lot of people I used to work with, I won't associate with anymore. It's the extent of it is pretty. I mean, sorry to ramble. It's really disturbing, the extent of it. I'll just say that.
No, first of all, I appreciate it. I just don't know enough about who's associated with who. That's all. I just did. So
there are better people than me. There are other people than me that have gone into this issue quite publicly. So if anyone, rather than just take my vague, this isn't my chief issue. So rather than just take my vague explanation, anyone who's really interested should search DavidSacks, Breonna Joy Gray, and they'll find.
Well, just as you were talking, I know this is from 2021, but from his own.
Oh yeah, there's Glenn Greenwald.
His own media. Yeah. It says here, creators assemble: Greenwald, Taibbi, Breonna Joy Gray, Antonio Martinez. Yeah. And then he's saying, "I'm excited to announce that call-in recently welcomed." So is this separate? Is this separate from?
No, this is what we're referring to here. This is, okay. I mean, this is the gist of it. So beyond this,
not Andre.
Oh, I know him.
Well, we've had some contact over the years with Andre. It's been a while, but I just didn't. I didn't. Oh, so that would explain. Okay, so I did. Okay, so I can't. Well, I don't. So at one point when we were talking with Andre, I remember trying to ask him about what was becoming like his new friendship with Greenwald, because I was like, Greenwald is like ever more to going more to the right from a already from a position that I, you know, was far to the right of me anyway. So look, my point is I just don't know enough about who's associated with who, and I think so beyond that, I think you raise very important points about these kinds of connections and webs, and to what extent people are aware or are not. I don't know, and I don't know if they know, but it would seem like
Yeah, sure, and they
you
should
know,
they
they
should
should,
they should
but they
definitely
should
address it.
become
Yeah.
aware. I think people should be aware, and I think that's at minimum an eerie connection. David Sacks and Peter Thiel and all of that. So wow.
The thing with Peter Thiel is it's really
Oh
hard
man.
to it's easier now to be taken seriously when I say this, but Peter Thiel has his finger in all the pies. And it's understandable. It's actually realistic when you go back and look at what he does, who he's connected to. He's the kind of he's not just like Cornelius Vanderbilt, another guy who just makes trains or steel, U.S. Steel or something like that. He's a guy who's at the very, very fundamental sort of apex of the intelligence community, data, finance, the far right. I mean, they personally employed Andrew Arnheimer, the head of one of these Nazi agitation groups. He's got a big swastika tattoo. It's a guy that Greenwald was hanging out with in 2013, 2014. And still onwards today. I mean, it's just, and this was hard for me to accept too. I remember Glenn Greenwald, as I've said before, was my absolute hero. I believe these guys fully and totally, along with Assange and all that. But the extent of the white supremacy, you know, it's such a bad situation that even the white supremacy connections aren't even the worst part. That's how bad it is. Their connection with the intelligence community and the white supremacists, and of course, and the overlap thereof. And it's just, those are things that, again, in a more ideal, if we had a better opposition, I guess a more cogent and less mystified, less propagandized counterculture, or whatever you want to call it, these are things that would be addressed. And that's kind of the fundamental crux of where we're at, is that they're never addressed. I mean, they are, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I say here. It doesn't matter that people with much more greater followings than me have been putting these out. It's just, there's so much information to get around, and there's so much to be gained by flooding the zone, as the term, it seems to be a newish term. You hear it lately. I think it's a good term. Flooding the zone with just all kinds of stuff, such that nothing is really acted upon, and nothing really has any coherency. Anyone who wants to, can continue to pretend that Greenwald is really what he claims to be, despite the mounds of evidence to the contrary by those of us who took a bullet for him back in 2011, 2012, when he was being targeted by Palantir before he went to work with Palantir, which he, now does with openly. It took him a few years to openly work with Peter Thiel. It would have been embarrassing when I'm still in prison and he's running my columns on TheIntercept for him to be like, "Oh, I'm working with Peter Thiel now." But over time, he took that step and then publicly got involved with Rumble, which one of your other commenters is pointing out. So these are things. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a little I'm a little sidetracked in my mind now. That wasn't that was so. If we could just, all right, maybe we can come back to I don't know if there was something else you wanted to make sure you got to. We can go, but I admit I'm
I just
a
want
little
to make sure
distracted by
I
that
get
for a
this
second.
across.
Yeah.
The Intercept's connection to the aforementioned Wikistrat employee that I mentioned, the one whose co-editor Lorax Horn wrote to Morgan State to try to get you fired a few years ago. The Intercept via Micah, what's his damn name? Oh, their former tech guy. Anyway, they were very heavily involved in laundering that whole thing. When the documents came out showing that Emma Best had distributed their secrets, this person tried to get you fired,
Yeah.
and who's written half my Wikipedia page now. It's been rewritten over the last year to be derogatory.
Yours?
Yeah. My Wikipedia. You should take a look at it. It's the first couple of paragraphs. It says Barrett Brown has been accused of harassing women online, a claim that he denies. Doesn't say where that comes from. Doesn't say who did it. Shit like that.
Man.
So it's pretty bad. My mom's upset. She keeps trying to get me to get it changed. I keep trying to tell her, look, there's only so much you can do. Anyway, so
yeah, I had a brief exchange with the Wikipedia folks once, and
you told me about that. Yeah,
I gave up. Yeah, that's yeah, that would be frustrating.
just scroll down a little bit. You'll see the.
He's been praised for his columns.
Oh yeah, here's the quote from Emma Best here. Again, Emma Best. This is the a court document came out a few years ago. You and I talked about this, showing which Emma Best changed their name from one male name to another,
right,
in service to her ongoing career within U.S. military counterintelligence. We think the Russians are the ones who found and leaked those documents. This is where it came from. And had already been caught working for Wikistrat, the aforementioned Israeli intelligence firm. This quote here, a paranoid junkie writing political persecution in old glories, that's from Emma Best, quoted in the New York Magazine profile of me.
wow.
Oh,
and
this
allegations of
harassing
harassing
women,
which
no
he denies.
link for what that might mean. In fact, it's
no, the link is just to a definite.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying that the link that they have here
is cyberbullying.
It's just a definition of cyberbullying.
In case you want more information about this, about me harassing women online, the field back to me. Yeah.
So yeah, and then one of these footnotes is to your book.
Yeah, some of these changes were made by anonymous contributors to WikiLeaks as opposed to their usual editors. So that's fun. But anyway, so yeah, so it's just worth reiterating briefly that among the Intercept's demonstrable and already mentioned and unrefuted instances of really bizarre connections to some of the worst and most egregious intelligence contractors in the world, it just doesn't get addressed. They're not in a position where some CEOs come out and say, hey, here's what this was about or whatever. And again, the worst part is that all these reporters, some of whom probably started out wanting to be well-meaning, wanting to do something good, when it came right down to it, they had a choice. Am I going to keep quiet about what the Intercept has been caught doing and thus put in danger more whistleblowers like Reality Winner? Or should I keep my mouth shut? Or better yet, tell myself it's not true. Tell myself that people making these accusations, despite the documentation involved, are just somehow it's just a fantasy of their imaginations. They have PTSD. That's my Wikipedia page says. And so that's just it's a great examination, just a great example of the larger macrocosm here of how the press and many activists and people in the activist sphere have conducted themselves over the last 15 years. And it's kind of how we got to this point. Anyway.
So just to cap off at least the story, reality is as far as the movies go, Reality Winner as a result is again the FBI shows up at her place, and one of the bits of evidence is the crease in the folded printout that shows that she would have printed it out and then sent it to the Intercept.
Right.
Then the Intercept, as you've explained, with some very interesting and curious decision making, including this liaison to the NYPD or whatever being in charge of. By the way, when doing the work that the Intercept is doing or was doing, or that even when you were supporting their work, what would have been the protocol for confirming the receipt of those printouts from Reality Winner?
Well, confirming the legitimacy of them.
Yeah, what would have been?
So I couldn't speak to the specifics on that because I've never been in a position. I've always been the leaker, not the. Well, I mean,
right.
I'm not. I've never worked in that position at a media outlet where I'm handling classified documents.
Okay.
No one would give me that job, not even the press.
Okay.
And rightfully so. But it definitely does not. From what I remember of the discussions, public discussions about this, because it was discussed quite a bit in the first few months after she was arrested, within the press, on Twitter among journalists. It does not involve sending a physical facsimile, whatever you pronounce it, representation of the documents themselves. There's no added value in confirming the veracity of the documents by sending the physical evidence.
Right. Yeah.
Especially if you're running a website called TheIntercept that is asking people to send them stuff, saying we will ensure your not anonymity. I mean, so I'm glad the movie does kind of. They didn't really have time. It's a deep well, so they didn't have time to go down that well. But they did kind of allude to it, and I like that, But it's all. But again, what I don't like is that even that, Sydney Sweeney is a huge star, She hosted Saturday Night Live, a while back. You would think that if anything would be enough to get the ball rolling on, hey, what happened with The Intercept? What was that? Why does somebody, why were so many FBI aligned individuals there? Why are some of them working with the NYPD now? What was Pierre Omidyar's deal? Is there any connection between The Intercept and what's going on now with Trump, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk? Those questions where the answer is yes, and where a lot of the specifics have already been put out by people with more eye for detail than I have. It does disappoint me that that's not been enough to get that ball rolling. And that's just that, to me, that's a real metaphor here. It's just the information. It's no longer worthwhile leaking information. The apparatus, the state apparatus, and the intelligence contracting firms they've given up. They gave up long ago on trying to prevent leaks. What they veered into instead was making leaks not matter. And they've done a fantastic job of that. If you go back and look at how things worked in 2011, 2012, in terms of some of these leaks that we did and how they were jumped upon and Congress started investigating, it is night and day. There's too much. One of the reasons is there's too much nonsense going on every day for it to be worthwhile for a news outlet to really do a deep dive or even have it summed up to them. But there's other factors at play too, and that's that's where firms like Wikistrat, people like Emma Best, come in, the intelligence assets.
So I do remember when they were doing an assessment of Obama's first time he got elected president, and they were talking to his then campaign manager, Rahm Emanuel, and he said the media strategy was just as you explained is happening writ large, that they said we put him everywhere. We put Obama everywhere, had him giving speeches constantly, ads constantly, billboards, and they said explicitly, because even if you had a criticism of something you heard from him, by the time you organized your thoughts and conveyed them anywhere on any outlet, he has already said 1,000 more things that people are thinking about. So it makes it's to your point, it makes the leak of him saying something wrong irrelevant, given the mass of his presence and all that else that goes into that form of propaganda. But going back to something you just said a minute ago, if you were to give your best, even if you were saying insufficient summary of why you think this current moment exists, in part because of The Intercept's role in even what happened with Reality Winner, that is Trump's second victory, Musk, Thiel with his vice president there and all of that. How do you summarize it? Yeah.
I think it's best summarized as there was a concerted and very conscious effort going on from about 2010 on by people close to the CIA and military intelligence to co-opt, to infiltrate, to dispose of the radicals within movements like WikiLeaks and Anonymous, to encourage the worst habits and the worst instincts of its leaders, and to apply old COINTELPRO tactics within those milieus in order to ensure there's no place to go. As in back in the day in 2011, 2012, you supported WikiLeaks because WikiLeaks was putting out documents from states that the states didn't want to have. End of story. But a few years later, Assange is now surrounded by people like Kim.com. He's surrounded by all of these weird grifter types who are just telling him yes to everything. And meanwhile, he still has associates who are, loyal to the original mission. But ultimately, in that context, these kind of people, especially technical people, it's particularly easy to push them in different directions. They have a number of bad instincts to appeal to begin with. And so you have this large effort that really only became clear in the last few years, going back to other leaked documents and other messages I've seen by individuals who've been close to this. You see at every level, anyone who becomes known for being an independent voice against the establishment, you either bribe them, you co-opt them without them knowing it, which is what happened to me when I wrote for TheIntercept from prison, not knowing what it was. I mean, that was a gambit by Greenwald to use my credibility as a political prisoner to buttress TheIntercept. And in some cases, they inserted individuals. Like, again, Andrew Arnhauer, who also works with Distributed Denial of Secrets, invested all in these FBI assets and has for a while. He was portrayed as an anonymous activist. Now, the guy had nothing to do with anonymous whatsoever. He was not in any of our groups. When he was arrested, it was for something else. But he was put in several documentaries that were made with the participation of a couple of FBI assets, including Greg Hausch and Joe Pionda, and also put in a New York Times article in which me and Andrew Arnheimer are compared to Socrates, thus associating us. These are guys. This is the guy who was our enemy from way back. He was an outright enemy. He was not at all what we were for, but he was portrayed as such. And so that when his Nazi thing became more visible, it was used by some of these other guys with Gawker, who went on to work at TheIntercept or New York Times, like Adrian Chen, as a means of discrediting Anonymous. So that's just one example of how it's done. But I did promise to make it succinct. Here's what they did. They managed to take everything that was working for us and make it work for them, and make it work for their purposes. And there's just a number of. It's depressing to see how well this works, how many ways there are to do it, and how little defense there is against it. That definitely contributed to the rise of the alt-right, which sort of co-opted a lot of the issues that you might call the alt-left back in the day were on, made it their issues and turned it into not a left-wing anarchist or just a left-wing anarchist versus establishment thing, but a right-wing authoritarian versus establishment thing. And it takes a number of years for it to become clear that the trajectory has changed. So WikiLeaks is still being supported in 2016, despite its actual conduct, despite Assange's conduct, by some people who still, won't hear anything against him, have correctly understood that he's the subject of a great deal of disinformation, and who are thus reluctant to acknowledge when he is caught out doing things contrary to what he's claiming to do. And it becomes this whole scrum whereby, to criticize it, to point out, here's the issues that are happening, we're being infiltrated by this person, all that. There's all kinds of ways, as any student of radical history knows, there's all kinds of ways to discredit the messenger and to again, flood the zone. So there's no certainty, so forth. So, and that's the gist of it. You really have to see all the other dozens of little instances of it, of the individuals who have been co-opted in different ways, what's happened afterwards, what happened when they found out, what other tactics were used, and some of that stuff is not mine to share. But to see a lot of it, to see as much as I have, it does give you a sense that a lot of what's happened with the rise of the alt-right can be traced to not just the failures of the establishment, but to the active diligence of the far right within the intelligence community to make this happen. And it's a sad thing because it still kind of goes on, and it will never be. There's no room for accountability in the current environment. There's just no space for it. There's no urge to it, and there's definitely no impetus among reporters or editors to look back and say, what role did we play in this? Did we accidentally, when we ran this story with this source, was that an FBI asset who's now documented as FBI asset? Should we go back, therefore, and issue a correction? How can we undo the damage? It's happened over and over again in the last 10 years. And there's just, to point it out is to be perceived as complaining. It's to be perceived as blaming your problems on someone else. And those are exactly the kind of, that's the kind of rhetoric that you'll see some of the known assets using in different forms, and you'll see it sort of trickle into our magazine articles and so forth. So from my standpoint, they've cut us off from the infrastructure we once had in terms of getting a message out without it being diluted or changed, or the opposite. They've just cut off all exits. And so the kind of things that we were able to pull off in 2011, 2012 that were of such concern to the NSA and so forth just can't be done anymore.
It's man, so many questions and tributaries and lines of thought to follow up. I just had been revisiting your book earlier this morning, and you somewhat spoke to this, but you in this part where you're talking about your own engagement with the anonymous community, you said here that the takeover and vandalism of enemy websites so as to prompt press attention to some issue, crowdsourced opposition research, the ability to mobilize huge numbers of people with a wide range of skills in short amounts of time, and to provide opportunities for anyone with a good idea to get it aired and implemented within moments. It also left many with a taste for blood. And then you go on to say that a few outsiders got the impression that Anonymous was a sort of well-intentioned activist group. And it had me thinking of just, as you were talking there about that moment where the just as you said, the abilities, the tactics, and the work that could be marshaled on behalf of something more to the left or better is so easily co-opted and turned against everybody. And that if people who are not in advance of a certain act or set of acts already politically aligned and clear about their political alignment, then folks can take this stuff and go in any number of different directions. Or others could be allowed, as you were saying, of that one character to be falsely associated with the work of a group, because that group is not in and of itself organized in such a way to claim certain credit or leadership.
So the assets were also liabilities in that sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. So listen. Yeah. So unfortunately, again, my time is a little bit short. But if there's, I do have at least a couple more minutes, and I do have one question that I saved from Chitty Matcha asking about your thoughts on Malcolm Harris's Palo Alto. I'm reading it now. People in the Bay Area's role in empire. I'm not familiar with it. I'm assuming this is a book that is relatively new. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not either, but I can assume from the context that it's about some of the Silicon Valley people who have gotten involved in the intelligence community and that whole, the intelligence community back in the 40s and 50s, was a very different creature. It came from the WASP aristocracy and plus some hardcore Catholic Opus Dei people mixed in there, and some just absolute maniacs. It was a certain kind of, it was the cream of the WASP crop. It was very much the people who went to Skull and Bones and had these traditions of ruling the world and so forth. And now it's, since then, obviously the gravity of power has changed, such the gravity of power increasingly came from technology and so forth. And so going back to the 80s, the intelligence community gradually made use of that. They infiltrated or made deals with, Bill Gates and so forth, and Apple, and that extended on into the present day. Along the way, a certain other kind of person, generally a white, a person like Elon Musk, basically, Peter Thiel, managed to grab hold of that of much of that process, and combined it with public exposition, combined it with a sort of a form of the theatrics that we used to engage in. It's anonymous. and just made it theirs to some extent. I mean, you can never fully control something like the CIA, no matter who you are. The director of the CIA doesn't matter. A creature like that is untamable. But you can certainly, to the extent anyone can push it in a certain direction. Yeah, Palo Alto is a city in California where a lot of these people live, these tech bros. Yeah, but you can certainly push it in a certain direction. You can change the tenor. You can also, and by doing so, you can make it very difficult for those fighting a rearguard action within it, who are loyal to, say, the establishment, centrist, end of history theme or whatever. You can make it difficult for them to recapture their own foothold in it.
Sorry, Esme. Academics are impervious to this process, by the way. Not so
the process of
co-optation and corruption and being put to the use of intelligence. Now, no. We are could never happen. Only the tech community is susceptible to that.
But I only know these things in a broad outline, because my focus is kind of light elsewhere. So people who want to know more about that, they shouldn't go to me, because I only know I can't stand these people, so I can only look so far into that history and all that. I'm only aware of the history that I've sort of, edging upon in the last 15 years. I really can't. I just can't stand them.
Yeah. Well, listen, Barrett, I look for another excuse to have another conversation with you sooner than later. And sorry to be cutting this somewhat short, but I do encourage people to, and I'll put a link to it in the show description, to get your book, My Glorious Defeats, Hacktivist, Narcissist, Anonymous, a memoir. It's fascinating, the political imprisonment, the hacktivist so-called history, and sort of, and as you've said, it's almost like a history, the precursor to this current moment. So I encourage people to check it out. And I thank you for coming through. I really appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Anytime. So listen, everybody, I'm just going to sign off from here. Peace, everybody. Only if you're willing to fight for it, as Fred Hampton used to say. Big shout out to the chat, the undefeated chat. Please like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Make sure to check out the morning show, the Remix Morning Show from Black Liberation Media. Earlier this morning, Mtume was on with Millennials Are Killing Capitalism. If you didn't see that, please go check that out. And Barrett, thanks again. And we'll catch everybody again next time right here at...
And what do you sacrifice?
Calm, kindness, kinship, love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago, for which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, that set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there's no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything.
I mix what I like.